Joining us now, former U.S. ambassador to Russia and MSNBC international affairs analyst Michael McFaul, and retired four-star general and MSNBC military analyst Barry McCaffrey. And Ambassador, you and I have spoken several times over the course of the past few weeks, and you have urged the president to enact these sanctions on Russia. Your thoughts now?
This is an important positive achievement. I'm glad they finally did it. These are the first sanctions that the Trump administration has imposed. It's not going to change everything right away, and the real key will be how they enforce these sanctions. They sanctioned the two of the largest oil companies. What now has to happen for them to be effective is for us to punish those that actually import barrels of oils from these two companies. So that's the devil in the details, and we'll see if we actually do that. But better than not doing it. I would have liked to have seen this 3 years ago, of course. But better late than never. So
speaking of the details here, Putin, these sanctions on Putin, these sanctions target 5% of Russia's global oil output, with reporting now that China and India, the two biggest purchasers of Russian crude, are already starting to look for other sources of oil, which, you know, in the West, we would say that's good news. Russia has found loopholes to these kinds of sanctions in the past. So to your earlier point, what more needs to happen to make sure these sanctions are hitting where it hurts?
Well, one, we have to punish those that import the oil. So that's a good sign that they're looking for other sources, but they also might be looking for other sources of other Russian oil that's not sanctioned. So we need to monitor that. Two, we need more sanctions on the banks that facilitate these transactions, and we have the power to do that if we want to. And three, I would like to see them keep ratcheting up sanctions. Every week that the war goes on, there should be a new sanction. I compare it to parking tickets here where I work at Stanford University. You park your car in the wrong place, you get a ticket that day. If it's still there illegally, the next day you get another ticket. And I think that should be the approach to sanctions. There are many more things we could do if we wanted to ramp up sanctions. And I think that should be the strategy that the Trump administration implements.
General, at what point do these sanctions start to really impact the Russian war effort?
Well, look, I've taken part in a lot of unsuccessful economic sanction regimes against, Iraq, Iran, and other nations. They always seem to have some way of subverting them. Right now, the only way this would really work, and I certainly take Ambassador McFaul's statement as the positive one, is if China and India have secondary sanctions. There's 8 refineries in those two countries. There's a giant Russian ghost fleet that's illegally moving these oil supplies. I cannot imagine us effectively shutting down China, India. We'll see. What would have been more effective was to keep on the table supplying the Tomahawk missile with its 1,500-mile range to the Ukrainians. It might have taken a year to get technical and training done to make it a real threat. But in the meantime, it would have had an enormous impact, a frightening impact on Russia's industrial capacity to produce energy, military targets, et cetera. I think the final thing is President Trump's volatility, sort of a government by decree, by whim, makes less valid his attempts to sanction Russia. I don't think Putin believes anything is going to actually happen to him.
Okay, so two-part question here, General. Why is the president holding back on those Tomahawk missiles? And tactically speaking, how much of a game changer would it be for Ukraine to have those weapons?
Well, this war has gotten technically more sophisticated and ruthless as the years have gone by. The Russians are deliberately targeting civilian installations. They're killing or wounding, maiming thousands of civilians, men, women, and children. They feel a sense of impunity. We give Ukraine targeting intelligence, but that also demanded control of their use of British Storm missiles, USA ATACMS missiles. So we've never allowed the Ukrainians full ability to use these weapons. The Tomahawk, 1,500 miles, would change the equation completely, economically, politically, militarily. It couldn't. They were only fired off UK and US submarines and ships. So it would probably take a year to make this reality come through, but we should have done it. Right now, Putin is winning the war in Ukraine. He's a criminal. He invaded a sovereign state. Our NATO allies are appalled at our lack of support. This is a very dangerous circumstance. And others are watching, President Xi in China, saying, am I getting a green light to take Taiwan in 2 years?
Ambassador, I know that you have said we should worry less about what Putin may do in response to what we do. Trump's special envoy, Steve Witkoff, is reportedly planning to meet with Russia's envoy in the U.S. tomorrow. Russia wants to resume those plans for that second summit in Budapest. Should the Trump administration, should Trump himself be meeting with Putin at this stage of the game?
Only if there's an outcome, a tangible outcome from the summit. And so this is maybe a good sign. They're trying to prepare that. But I think the mistake in Alaska was he met with Putin without any expectation that there would be any outcomes. He didn't get a ceasefire. He didn't even get a third meeting that he said he wanted to get between him, Zelensky, and Putin. So I think this time around, the Trump administration needs to agree to the agenda, agree to what we call in the State Department deliverables before the meeting. Because if it's just another meeting without an outcome that's good for the United States and good for our allies and good for Ukraine, then the meeting shouldn't happen.
And many would argue it's gotten even worse with the bombing of a kindergarten just in the last week. Michael McFaul,
Yes.
General McCaffrey, thank you both so much.